Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech with your host, Elias. I'm gonna talk about something that is, I would say, interesting. Very interesting because it's being nonpartisan, and some may think it's too critical of America. I don't mind that in the show. This is not a safe space. No, I hate safe space. You want to avoid talking because it's hard. No, that's the reason why we should talk. We need to learn how to have difficult conversations, or even, instead of just thinking about your feelings and your ego, you might have some good points, but sometimes you need to hear other sides of the issue so you could be smarter at least, or maybe change your position just a little bit. Okay. They're just, oh my God, I'm hearing the enemy talk. This is where we at in America. You're part of the different side, you're the enemy. No, America used to know how to talk to someone on the opposite side. We used to. We argued and then we went kumbaya as if nothing happened. But no, in America, people they look at each other as an enemy. Oh, you're the enemy. I don't want to talk to this Democrat or this Republican. But we're going to talk about something much bigger than that because, in my opinion, both parties are stupid. We're going to talk about a much bigger issue that I think America is, I'm going to be very honest, we are at a disadvantage. If you think you're doing well, get your hand out of the sand or in your butt. Look, I'm just going to say this. China, we could talk about the AI race, United States versus China. That's what we're talking about. Well, we could talk about something else along the way. I don't mind that. This is a free flowing podcast. We could go off the rails a little bit. I do it myself, so it's okay. All right. We need to talk about this. How can America do better? Because China right now, I could just say just a few things. They created DeepSeek, a far better AI, and they spend a lot less money. Okay. And they're implementing AI in grade school. Okay. So they are already playing the long game. They already have a lot of engineers. They want to continue to have more engineers, even when the old engineers pass away. So they are already thinking about the replacement. That's what we're doing. We're just finding better ways how to make anime videos, make ourselves look more beautiful than what we are. Okay. Let me just think of a stupid example. I want to look like I'm 15 years old. AI just do that, clean all the age marks, all that good stuff. There you go, done. That's what we're thinking about. We just use it for silliness, for social media fame. Okay, we're not using it to. I mean, some companies are using it to improve it. Don't get me wrong, but we need to do better than that. I think AI education should be taught. Yeah, I know some Americans are uncomfortable with that, but we need to. This is the next technological evolution. Remember about the factories? So let's go back to that history. Factories was a major disruption. This is it. This is another major revolution if you want to be kind, but if you're cynical or you don't like it, it's a disruption. But we humans, great human beings, adapt. We adapt. We don't stick to the past. Look, the past was great. I get it. But if you want to continue to do well, especially if you want to lose your job, AI it's a must at this point. It's almost as important as oxygen for your job, that is. Okay? All right. Enough of me. Yeah, man, I already give you a little bit to let's introduce this guest, newcomer. This will be our infotainment. Yep, information and entertainment for those of you who haven't figured out that merging word, okay? Infotainment. Let's welcome, and feel free to correct me, Saji Manapat. I got that right.
Yes, you got it right. Yeah.
Okay, very good. I normally I'll be more prepared than this. We're gonna talk about this whole AI arms race with US and China. You know, just like if you want to think about history, the space race between Russia, United States, Russia beat us on that one. Big loss for United States. Will history repeat for United States? Will we lose this AI race? The way things are going on right now, we're at a disadvantage. And before I get started, and he's been waiting patiently to talk, what do you want the viewers and listeners to know about you, Saji?
That's a great question. First of all, let me thank you, Elias. I'm a big fan of yours, and I've watched many of your podcasts, and I really appreciate the honor to be, on your platform. Something about myself, in short, I'm a tiger rider, a contrarian, I look at the perspective of, unlike the typical perspective, many of those, whether it is for my own consulting assignments or like taking a life itself, or whatever I get into, rather than looking at the mostly this part of the world, we are driven by the tweet cycles or in a very short term focus, sound bites and the bullet points, especially the mainstream media. I tried to my background. I'm an industrial engineer. Then later on did my MBA in finance, in the primarily on the project appraisal and the equity research and the merchant banking, investment banking side of it. So naturally, I started with my research background, rather than looking at the just analyzing the balance sheet and the P&L alone, underneath the organization. That's how I started. So I'm in a way, I came here as especially during the biggest business blunder in the world history. That's Y2K. I put it as like, the whole world was, those who, I know many of this audience may be a little younger than, the maybe born after the Y2K. So those days, the whole business world thought, like the whole world is going to collapse in front of our eyes on January 1st, 2000. So in short, I came here to fix all the Armageddon code, to fix this the like as a cyber coolie over here to fix it. And anyway, I moved up the chain, and I especially I do the consulting work in some of the largest corporations in the world, including on the Fortune 10 most admired organizations in the world. Including I was also with one of the major Big Four consulting player also. I've been to around physically been to around at least around 20 countries, and I've seen around 40-50 different financial systems around the world, including with the one second largest private equity firm or alternate investment fund in this part of the world. So in short, let me also put it this way: I'm a naturalized citizen, but I do have this is more of a out of my social responsibility. So before it is too late, I used to be worried about my kids about 4-5 years ago, but now especially with the AI coming into the picture, and with some of the fluffs you're talking about, with all the tweet cycle, uh, I'm uh, I'm more worried about it's all the professional class like me, all the middle class in the whole. It used to be, especially during the industrial, all the outsourcing era, it was mostly affected by the blue collar jobs. Now it is going to hit the white collar. The whole middle class is going to wipe out pretty soon unless we adapt. So in short, so the Chinese learned from the century of I mean, century of shame. So they learn from us, especially in this part of the world, especially from the Roosevelts, whether it is Theodore or the FDR or the way they're adapting, they're bringing their farmers mindset, and versus we are going back to we are in a hunters mindset in a very short term. Our focus is every tweet cycle, or in the Wall Street terms, very quarterly focused, or versus over election cycle perspective every 2 years, either the presidential election or from like the midterm elections happening. So our focus is a very narrow short term focus, versus the Chinese. They're looking at it from a perspective. Their focus is their ultimate objective is 2049, their century of rejuvenation. So that is the focus. So we are completely against it's a much bigger beast. We have no idea about what is happening around us. The Chinese, when you're looking at many of those corporations are there, around 60-70% of their Fortune 500 companies out of China are state-owned enterprises. Do you have any idea about how much state backing money, that their capex assets they hold? They hold around over 50% of the world GDP. That comes to over $50 trillion assets they hold. backed by the state. And over here, we are trying to compete even some of the largest corporations in this part of the world. We are competing more on the fluff side, very short term focused, versus their focus is on the dynasty, building this dynasty. It is a 3,000-year-old civilization, or maybe something 3,000 to 5,000-year-old civilization, versus our whole, this country is built, 200 years back, and we are looking at with the ADHD, we are looking at a very short-term mentality. Fortunately, the whole world is, moving the other way.
You hear that, listeners and viewers. I know some of you may be upset, especially, oh, America's the best at everything. Look, I love America. But we have to be honest here. We have to be honest here. You could call me a communist, a traitor to America, all you want. I want America to succeed. But we need to shift our mindsets instead of just focus on the stupid social media, traditional media, noise, and sounds. And they have long-term goals that could really improve the United States. Is it going to happen? I don't know. To be honest, I'm not as hopeful because you're right. Everything's about quarterly. And then when it comes to the federal elections, it's a midterm and the president, and it's back to midterm and the president. Yeah, we Americans, we just go fast sometimes without, we run fast in the fog. So we could have hit some things. We're sometimes walking into things blindly. We're not thinking long term. And I think this is a simple question here. And this is going to be the first very simple question. Who's winning, US or China? I think you're ready. I think the answer is pretty clear as of right now.
It is not the matter of winning. Let me give maybe a little bit longer answer. First, why I got into this one. When I wrote the very first edition of the book around 5 years ago, during that 1.0, tail end of is 1.0, and with the COVID scenario, I wrote this book I saw the writing on the wall pretty clearly. And at that time, I was more concerned about my kids. So I wrote the first edition of the Gods Must Be Crazy book. In that backdrop, again, I noticed at that time itself, around 2/3 of the world was economically colonized by China. Even if we have around 70 or 80 bases all around the world, they're all pretty much like many of the fancy aircraft carriers are this sitting duck against, a $10 million, the $13 billion fancy Ford class aircraft carrier is a sitting duck against just a $10 million missile, from China. So I wrote from that perspective at that time. So now with the 0.0, with the currently what is happening, especially in the AI sector, in a way, it has affected me personally. And I used to be worried about only, again, 5 years ago, I was worried about my kids. Now I'm already affected by my own. That's a key reason I came out with the second edition of there's the Gods Must Be Crazy book. So with this one, you're coming back to your question, who is winning? We pretty much, we were one. Again, that's a question we need to address it a little bit from a historical perspective. How we won back in this country won. It is the capitalism. Who built the foundations of capitalism. It was done, again, based on my analysis, primarily by Theodore Roosevelt. He in early 1900, he built the White Fleet, that's biggest navy in the world back then. And we pretty much, including in the Panama Canal we built, we pretty much colonized, especially many of the South American countries, like we had a big influence, like we built the foundations of the capitalism. And his cousin, Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, he came at a very challenging times as we are going through during the Depression era, during this World War II era, and he looked at some of the fundamental issues, like what we are facing today. And he built it with a long-term mindset, as a farmer mindset. And he's looking at, like, he had the luxury of, he had the backing of the whole industry came together with him, the whole, the government and the whole, for example, in just 1 year itself, we were building over 40,000 aircrafts. In the same way, like the Pentagon was built in 18 months time, the whole Pentagon. So we brought together, we got the mojo back at that time, especially with after the Second World War. We become the largest. We took the throne from Britishers, and we become the number one. Like we pretty much rule the world till around till recently. Now, with coming back to your question, who is winning? Unfortunately, we are looking at a very short term, with a very short term mentality. We are looking at some of the fluffs. We are losing our game in pretty much most directions. So one of our strongest point, especially with the FDR, he brought the not just the Britishers, he brought the Stalin, he brought the whole world together. We built the United Nations. We built the whole every country, pretty much most countries on earth, they rallied behind us. Now the whole world is running away from us. If you take a look at it, especially the BRIC countries, the earlier like there was a big conversation about coming out with the BRIC currencies. I think that the country which was against that one, it was in the India. The Indians were against coming out with the BRIC countries. Again, I don't know how many of your audience are familiar with the BRIC countries. They're about, I think, 2/3 of the population in the world. And if you to take a look at the whole, if you combine India and China together, it comes around 3 billion people around the world. And if you add, it used to be the 4 or 5 countries, now it's around 20 countries banging together on that one. And we made pretty much enemies of it is not just Europeans or another. We made enemies from all around the world. So in a way, if you look at it, so far, at least as of last year, around 58% of the trade, even though we are only, we control only 25% of the world, or happening, with us. We control, because of our world currency, the US dollar, mighty US dollar, around 58% of the trade used to happen with the in dollar denominated, trade. But unfortunately, with what is happening now, many of these countries are doing the trade with each other in their own currency to bypass the whole US dollar. And the BRIC currencies, like there is again, I think they're going to, this week, and as we speak now, there is a Shanghai conference going on in China. I think that they're celebrating the Second World War. Anyway, Xi Jinping is bringing the whole nations, pretty much around from 20 major the leaders he's bringing together. So ultimately, their objective is to completely torpedo US dollar. Again, if you take a look at it, beginning of this year, the US dollar depreciated at least by around 10% since the beginning of this year. That means we lost our purchasing power by at least by 10%. Whatever the US, if you have a bank saving in your account, you can comparing with the rest of the world, it depreciated by 10%. On the top of that one, with all the tariff and all those things, again, I'm not against the tariff. We need to have a strategic. Tariff is one of the two, we need to utilize, but not the way, copper bombing, all around the world. So we need to build the friends. To your question, unfortunately, we lost most of the war, most of those opportunity, but we still have some worn out trump cards. We still have some cards to play before it is, again, this is, you cannot play everything solo. You need to bring allies together around the world. Otherwise, it is we are living in an exponential age with the AI, with the Chinese ECNY. That's already around, I think, based on my couple of years in data alone, it's around 300 million people are transacting in ECNY, the Chinese digital yuan. So that is more than the US population, or pretty close to the US population already. So it is we are number one. We are still controlling, we are still winning some extent because of our mighty US dollar. That edge is completely eroding and it is going away at an exponential pace. So yeah, we can get into other AI and all those areas. I don't know. Yeah, I know I gave a long, bit. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I'm happy you gave a long answer because I was set up as a short, but your answer very well. We are in a losing. I mean, people. I'm just gonna give you a short answer. Well, you went through a big one about our soft power, our finances, well, military might. I think U.S. is still good there, but even though my thing was more on AI race, but that's you just gave like a broad, very global context of it. So I'm not against it because it already touched AI. Component of it, which China's winning right now. But can't America turn it around? That's the question, right? Or this trajectory is gonna go the same. I don't want to be, I don't want to be, sad or give you doom and gloom apocalyptic scenario. I think America still got some, just like you said, some cards or something they could do to turn it around, and they need to. The faster you do it, the better. Let's be honest. You already said this. Our soft power is declining. Very damaged relations, especially with Canada, the Western European countries, which we had great relations with because it was many things. I mean, the Ukraine war was one, and then the tariff just added more damage to it. But I don't want to get. Look, geopolitics is a part of it. I don't mind the mixing and tech of geopolitics. I mean, if anything, it makes a good, better conversation. Anyways, yeah, this is this is something that I really hope you pay attention to. It doesn't have to be American. Around the world, some of you may be celebrating. I did talk about BRICS several times about we need to get our act together because they're going to just bypass the dollar, trade within their currencies. I could buy gold, which America is a fiat currency. Yeah, I have talked about this several times with the BRICS, so my audience have some familiarity with the BRICS. It's not completely an alien subject. I try to educate because I think I started talking about 2 years ago. This is important. This could topple the U.S. dollar if this keeps going here. I mean, the American dollar is not as strong as God, okay? It could be destroyed. It could be, you already said, depreciated. It's going to be so depreciated, we might spend $1 million for a bread if that keeps up, okay? And, it has happened. Hyperinflation, happens. And it's definitely going to happen if we don't get our act together. It's for you to wake up, America. Wake up, and we have to change our plan, especially about building allies, which is very, very important. We cannot do this alone because for a long time we had most of the world on our side. That's why we were so strong, and that's something America needs to. We need to remember that and bring new strategies to restore alliances. Don't do what we did. We're not gonna pull another World War II. That's gonna definitely isolate us and even get us attacked. Look, we're not gonna pull another World War II. Though that time is over. We got to come with new strategies. 21st century. America needs to think in the 21st century. That's a big problem. We're thinking when we still like in 1950s, 1975, 1990s. No, we need to think 21st century. New ideas that could restore American exceptionalism. And not just American exceptionalism, treat the allies, better. We need to think of partnerships instead of inferior, superior, the colonizer and the victim, framing. That's another thing. And I've been saying that for years because we will not be the top dog forever. Just not. All great powers have, they rise up and they fall. That's what history taught us. Doesn't matter if it's a black, white nation, doesn't matter where. It's going to happen at some point. Okay? That's all I want to say. I mean, China went through their tough times as well, even though they've been around much longer than the United States, thousands of years, depending who you ask. I think they've been around much longer than us. That's another thing we have to, think about. That look, I think they turned that shame into fuel. We need to start turning our shame into fuel and learn from the past. Because if we learn our lessons for history, we'd be a better nation. But if we're gonna keep doing this nonsense, just pretend like history's not important, that's just for the past, it's for dead people, well, we're gonna have a really, really rough time. And I'm not sure Americans are ready, to become the third world country, which we're heading in that direction anyways. Yeah, I want to say that. That's scary. That's controversial. I don't care. It's the truth. I want America to do better. We need to get together, and we talked about the background of a lot of politicians.
Mhm.
So a lot of Americans are lawyers, reality TV show stars. I cynically add criminals into that mix. And then we already said that how some of the leaders from different countries have PhDs, engineering. I mean, lawyers, I'm not going to knock you down because you do have your use. But actors, do we need actors? No. And criminals, well, I don't know. There's an argument that criminals are creative, but they also ruin a reputation. So that's a double-edged sword right there. If you want to play it safe, no criminals. If you want to be really creative, use the criminal. But be warned, if you don't pay attention, you're gonna get screwed. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Anything else you want to add before I get to the next question?
Yeah, if I may, to your point, I think you address in both perspective also. So we need to look. We've been to this kind of challenges around 100 years ago, or in the 1900s, and especially with the Depression and the World War II, and all those. We've been to this kind of exactly this very similar challenging issues before. Our solution is also lies in the history. We don't need to read another self-help book or typically fluffy stuff. So what we need to look at is how our own leaders, how they address this kind of similar challenges. We can rise up, especially again looking back to uh, uh, the Theodore Roosevelts or the FDR or Eleanor. They all face very similar challenge, and it is a matter of learning from our own history, looking at from rather than looking at the fluff, sound bites, and the bullet points, looking at how they address it and do our own. We have our own solution. We have inherently, again, the, we can come back. We can rise up to the challenge. The American can come together, but unfortunately, sometimes it may need a major shock therapy. Otherwise, the way the things are going, sadly, we may. I'm afraid, we may do some shock therapy to realize. Otherwise, we a bunch of frogs happening. In a boiling water, the water is getting. It's already boiled, and as we mentioned, around we lost around purchasing power terms on US dollar lost about 10% of its value since the beginning of the year. On the top of that one, many of those tariffs are not yet reflected in our like the Walmarts and that kind of world. And by the Christmas or pretty soon, so I'm afraid the inflation is going to be we are going to erode our purchasing power terms. We are going to already lost the value in dollars in 10%. We are going to lose our purchasing power by at least 20 to 30%, pretty soon. We become 30% poorer before the end of the year.
I know this is scary for some of you, and I agree. America is a stubborn nation. It needs a major shock there. I love the analogy with the boiling water and the frog because that's America right now. We're just feeling a little bit of heat blistering, but it's not enough for the frog to move out. Once it gets really heated, the frogs is inside. It might be, in some cases, might be too late. But I want to become like the miracle frog. We want to hop out, heal, get our act together, and do that. And this is not for me to be negative. Just say America's stupid. It's not stupid, and he's already talking about it, and I'm going to emphasize it further.
And
We need
if I
to
may,
learn about the Roosevelt, because they were revolutionary. They were innovative. They were they did help America during challenging times. I mean, they were called crazy. They were called all kinds of names, but look at history. They fixed the problem that they intended to
Mhm.
solve. So there is hope, America. I just want to emphasize that. I'm not gonna do the doom and gloom anymore. I introduced it that way on purpose, but there is hope, despite, but we need to go through we need to go through the dark valleys, and shock therapies, whatever analogy you want to use. We have to go through some tough times. Okay. And that's how America is this stuff. Yeah. Feel free to add.
Yeah, if I may add, before getting into the solutions, so we may need to paint some of the realities. You know, I don't know how many of your are like those audience in this show been to some of the inner cities out of their ivory tower. Many of I think that many of these listeners are the middle class or the upper middle class or decent. So we are all living in an ivory tower. If you've been to the most of the the cities in this part of the world, and again, look at what's a cleanup happening in Washington D.C. or many, unfortunately, in many of I'm based in Memphis. Many of this, if 90% of this part of the city, you won't be there enough to drive around even the broad daylight. You can see the graffitis, young graffitis in many parts of this kind of cities. And this is we are in many parts of the no, again, many of us are living in an ivory tower. So this is in a way, it is a big way police state. And comparing with your analogy on third world countries, so many of those parts of this country, many of this, sometimes worse than the word I need to be careful, which I am using in the shit world, which you was referring about, like in the previous. So unfortunately, yeah, so many situations are worse than the third world country. I've been to around 18 countries around the world, and this country become number one. We become the global leader because of again, not just the FDR or the Theodore or if you look at the Eisenhower, he's a Republican president. He and his administration, they built the national highways all around this country. Do you have any idea in the past 10, 15 years how much infrastructure that like the national highways in China built? They built 10 times than what the US built in past, 10, 15 or 20 years. So they built the infrastructure. We are hardly even maintaining the already existing. I think it's been less than 1% on the infrastructure. So basically, just to do the patchwork, we are not even taking care of our own infrastructure. Look at the high-speed railway over here. Even after 20 years debate between San Francisco and LA, they're still not able to do anything. Meanwhile, I think the Chinese built I think several times to go around the world, the infrastructure, even within their country itself, the high-speed railways all around the country. And not only that one, through the Belt and Road Initiative, they're building infrastructure, much superior infrastructure in the so-called third world countries, including, look at that, the Pakistan itself, treated as, Pakistan, they build all the corridors, they have even much better infrastructure may have than this part of the world, the highways and all the corridor. The same way, they're building 2/3 of the world. They including Africa may have sometimes have much better infrastructure, much better port facilities, much better facilities than this part of the world.
And even much better airports too. Ooh, forgot. I mean, and I'm gonna go back to he's no Roosevelt here. Joe Biden, when his brain was more together, he said our airports look like third world hellholes. Not the exact words, but he said something along those lines, and that caused controversy. But I agree. I saw airports of Saudi Arabia and China and all them. You're going to future, but that's not the future. That's supposed to be the present. We're behind. Just like you said with the infrastructure and all that. I mean, this is not surprising to me because I've studied these things Especially, I was always into the geopolitics of looking what's going on around the world. I said, oh my goodness, if America could just have this focus, there's so much we could have done. But no, we're just busy bickering, playing politics and nonsense, just worried about enriching our friends and our circle. That's it. America's become hyper selfish. I think that's what I mean. Maybe but you already tackled on the next question about what's the problem with U.S. short term thinking. Well, you answered it. Lack of focus. You just gave great examples of that. So we'll continue the conversation.
And if I may
Go
add,
ahead.
it's not the short-term focus alone. We have a big ADHD problem. So what? And again, the China learned from the century of humiliation, and they're using the playing same cards. And now I'm afraid they learned from this, and they're using. We are addicted to the TikTok, some of the technology. We are already there at the century. If we don't play our cards right, unfortunately, it is going to be the next century is going to be our century of humiliation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the TikTok example. Chinese version TikTok, US version TikTok, very different. And I've seen people who have shown was trying TikTok doing showing the great, their culture and empower them with science and things to actually educate. American TikTok, it's just a bunch of mentally ill people shouting and some just shaking their butts. I mean, that's the that's the US or the West version of TikTok. I'll say more the US because that's the stuff that we watch, unfortunately. So about ADHD and attention span, our attention span is no better than a goldfish. I've said that before. I'm gonna say it again. It's no better than a goldfish. We go for one video to another, to another, to another. Yeah, it's like 30 seconds to a minute, but you're so addicted, hours fly by, just sitting, rotting, getting fatter, uglier, okay? And dumber, really. And I'm not saying this is just to be negative or worry, but this is the reality here. And I'll say the vast majority of American youth addicted to TikTok and even young adults. Now, I'll say like the older adults, what I mean by older adults, like 35 plus years old or higher, they're not as addicted. But you know what? There's some that are too, because especially if you see, they like to see happy fluff stuff. Oh, dancing. Oh, look at this 85-year-old. She could dance good. That's great. I mean, she's in great health, but you're getting distracted by, frivolous entertainment, if you will. While, China continues to rebuild Asia, parts of Africa, more than half the world at this point. Asia's a very large continent. If you forget your basic geography class, okay? And, it's we need to get our act together. And I'm just gonna jump straight to the next question. I think you're ready.
Do you mind if I add a quick
Oh yeah,
point
sure, sure, sure.
on the
Go ahead.
while we are on the TikTok? I think I assume your audience knows who owns the ByteDance owns the TikTok platform. And the TikTok over here in this part of the world is everything is all this. At least if you're shaking and if you're getting rid of some of our fat, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But unfortunately, we are dancing to the tune of the algorithms are controlled by the Chinese, and they can easily, relatively, like I think, based on my understanding, it's around 200 to 300 million people in this part of the world, are addicted to the TikTok. And you may look at who got one of the major presidential election platform was TikTok in the last presidential election, and the big way credited to the whole. Like the reason they didn't shut down the the platform because of one of the key reason is that's a reason. Versus the TikTok version of the US, that is based on my understanding that is banned in China, or at least the youngsters, or not just a TikTok, this kind of social media, the screen time in China is very much limited to. Especially with the Chinese. Even if they're using it, what they're teaching on this kind of platform is how to build the robotics, how to do the scientific stuff on the STEM area, and these are the things taught in the Chinese version of the TikTok. Versus over here, we are dancing to the tune of algorithmic tune of what the or the rage or or the funny stuff or the cat videos. And again, I'm not against the cat, no means, but at least it is, we are dancing to the tune of China.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, there's no argument. Look, look, people, if you want to argue that, you want to argue, say Saji or an Elias is crazy, feel free to express that. But you're not living in reality. You're entitled to your stupidity, but you're not entitled to the truth, okay? That's all I'm going to say. You're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to the facts. It's factual, and I'm going to link the channel. I hope, and if I don't link, it's because it's been banned. This man has exposed night and day difference. U.S. TikTok versus China's version of TikTok. Okay, it's almost like a completely different platform because of just how radically different the content is. It's more empowering, while the America is more entertaining and silly. And I'll just add one thing besides the dancing and cat videos. I love cat videos too. I'm not gonna attack the cat videos as well. I think that's okay. But there's just a lot of people just screaming like morons and spreading misinformation. Since I'm more political, that's why I'm more sensitive to that. People just, 16-year-olds, even 20-some-year-olds and 30-some-year-olds spreading misinformation and lies, dumbing down the U.S. population further. Just like you said, we are dancing and just reacting and feeding the Chinese controlled algorithm. And it keeps putting out repeat, and just throw maybe a little something different in between, but just to get you hooked. That's the main thing, right? Hooked and distracted.
And if I may just add,
Yeah.
this kind of points, if you're saying something productive, if you want to say this kind of algorithms, that is their lowest of the priority. But if you're doing some shouting video, some angry birds kind of, the video, if you're having a fist, at least, literally a fist fight on this floor, they're going to amplify this one. The rage, it's going to get at least 17% more amplification, and your video is going to be the to the top on their platform, because they make the advertisement by, they make their money by, on the race. Unfortunately, it is not just again the TikTok. Again, that is how it is $100 billion. The Facebooks and the social media is $100 billion business in this part of the world. And how they make their money? By bringing, through an uncivilized war, by bringing, the people on each other's throat by rage. So yeah, unfortunately, your voice and my voice, nobody want, at least for those algorithms, they can't make the money out.
Yeah, you're right. This is, of course, not just a TikTok. The reason I'm attacking the board because more owned in China, but you're right. That applies to Facebook, Instagram. Let's even throw YouTube. Just throwing YouTube in there as well. Might as well do that. And I'm not sure this app is as popular. Snapchat, that's another one. So you're right. This is not just TikTok. It's a social media wide. That's what they do with their algorithms. Whatever generates the most attention in the quickest amount of time, shouting, fighting, doing something outrageously stupid, it's going to be amplified, as opposed to having great conversation. You have to spread that organically, and that's easier said than done. So that you're right about that. Unfortunately, they rather have me. This is just me and you. They want me to slap Saji's head and call them all kinds of racist names. Oh, that will get attention, but having a good conversation would not. Like, you stupid immigrant. There you go. Something like that. They're going to clip that part, just this part right there, and make me look crazy at some point. That's okay. Good. That'll bring more attention to the podcast. Good. But yeah, you're right. Not a good civil intellectual discussion. That's why I try to throw a little entertainment in there. Hopefully they'll see it as that. I'll sprinkle that in between. You're right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you look at the whole market capitalization of this part of the world, you take a look at you're familiar with the Magnificent Seven, am I right? Including the Meta and the Google and all these companies. They control the whole the US. If you take a look at the stock market, the most of the market belongs to those seven companies, and they all make the money this way. Unfortunately, they all invest the money, like most of the money on this kind of activities. We are not doing anything much productive stuff. Versus on China, as I mentioned, spend, if you take it like around 75% of their Fortune 100, 500 companies are state-owned enterprises. They invested over $50 trillion in, like in the market, from the asset perspective. So they own around 50% of the global GDP around the world. They're looking at from a civilization perspective. They're looking at their target is from 2049 perspective. Versus here, if you do anything in the short term, like again, if you look at if you take a look at the solar panels and that kind of stuff, they're making the product, they're selling the product below maybe even half the material cost. Versus if our own company, if we do something like that one, by the next quarter, the C-level folks will be out, and there will be all kind of lawsuits happening, and and especially there is a lot of activist investors. They're all they will be taking over the company, and on the top of that one, they will be owned by some private equity firm or some other firm, pretty soon. So again, coming back, unfortunately, we are going in a completely wrong direction. Before it is too late, unless we play some of our own trump cards, especially from Roosevelt days, we are already numbered.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to change my last question because
Mhm.
I don't think the U.S. tech giants could be a good ally based on what you're saying because they're part of the problem too. Unless you could turn it around, maybe they could
Mhm.
be allies against this AI or just even this general race, against China. I mean, what can we do to turn around besides, people can say, what do you mean by this
Mhm.
Roosevelt, way of thinking and being?
Mhm.
I did that's my last question.
The Roosevelt's way of thinking, how we can get it back to our mojo back, or how we can turn it around. Yeah, again, this is where the Roosevelt's way of thinking coming into the picture. So we need to look at from what happened 100 years ago with Theodore Roosevelt, his square deal. So we are getting into a gilded age. We are already in a gilded age. This time it is controlled by the not by the railroad barons. The Magnificent Seven we were talking about, all the technology, algorithms, it's controlling us. So we need to have a square deal like what the Theodore Roosevelt brought. The same way the Franklin Roosevelt, we need to have a New Deal version of our own today's age, New Deal version on how we can invest on the infrastructure, how we need to put back, like our own infrastructure, build, our at least maintain the system going forward. Like we are hardly not even spending, not even 1% of our GDP on infrastructure. Versus the Chinese, they're spending 3 4 to 5% on the infrastructure. Not just in China, all around the world through the colonizing, through the Belt and Road Initiative, now with the digital Silk Road. That's one aspect. The second aspect is about we need to bring back the GI Bill. Do you know how, at least our parents, at least from those who are from this part of the world, how we built this country back, especially after the Second World War, with the GI Bill, all the Second World War military, like the people came back from they sent back to the schools, they sent back to the universities, they trained to become the professionals, the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers. That's how, we in 1950s, we brought up the educated knowledge economy, which can build our infrastructure, we can build our manufacturing industries, we can build our the whole engineering, research and development, all those things back. Unfortunately, again, we not only shift in the past 30-40 years, we not only put our manufacturing, our factories on a barge and ship it to China. We, along with that one, with a thank you note, and we gift wrap and send our intellectual proprietary rights. We send our research and development. We outsource all our knowledge economy along with that one. Again, everything we did it for a very short term, quarterly minded to get the boost on the stock prices, whether it is by our own C-level executives. Again, like or in the private equity kind of environment, we most of the corporations over here are sitting on especially those who are sitting on a huge debt. Many of these companies, at least significant portion of the companies, are owned by the private equity kind of. Most of the ones they buy, the private equities typically buy the good companies with the solid assets. They strip off all the assets. They sell everything to back to themselves, or they lend it back to, or impact. Most of these companies are saddled by a huge debt. So far, it was not exposed because the interest rates were low. But with the scenarios we are talking about, is already interest rate is significantly high. On the top of that one, with all the inflation hitting hard, the US dollar going down, all those, when you'll be seeing who is swimming naked when the tide goes out. Unfortunately, the tide is, unfortunately, by the end of the year, with the dollar depreciation, with all the tariffs hitting into the, it is going to expose all the skeletons in our closet. And maybe the third one, we're running out of time. The third one, we need to look at it so rather than we need to make, we cannot do it alone this time. Unfortunately, we are not living in the post-Cold War unipolar world. It is not the end of history like the Fukuyama wrote. It is the beginning of a new history. It's we are living in a multipolar world. We cannot do it alone. We need to bring the whole world together. That is the only way we can address many of those challenges. And we cannot bring back, realistically, even if we want to bring it back, all these manufacturing sectors which we lost in 30, 40 years, we can't bring it overnight back. Realistically, we are only 5% of the world population. Even if we bring it back, we don't have the people to work. First of all, it is going to be complete. It is not going to be the factory floor with full of people. It is going to be factory with full of robots. Let's take a look at over the growth. I'm based in Memphis. Memphis has the biggest AI computer center in the world. Period. Based on my, at least according to Elon Musk, the Grok Computer Center is. Do you have any idea how many people work in the biggest computer data center or in the world? Any idea?
I'm getting very low number. I'm assuming probably like 5.
It is more than there are about at least 30, 40 security guards.
Oh, okay. Security. Oh,
And
yeah. You need
security
that.
guards. And there are a lot of some, at least some point, all the electricians, connecting the the wires and that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of bunch of cleaners on that part of the world, in this, at least in the data center. So it is not even if you're bringing the whole AI back, like we're building all the AI data centers, it is not going to employ all the bunch of computer engineers or computer scientists or, unfortunately, yes, there's going to be some, but they may be sitting somewhere else, and like again. And many of those things maybe, unfortunately, will be offshoring. Again, more than half of the AI developers in the world, do you know where they're based? More than half of that in China.
But yep, I was gonna say China, not US.
Every one STEM graduates coming out of this part of the world, I think every year it's around less than 500,000 people, graduates from the STEM area. Have any idea how many STEM graduates are coming in from China? 4 million. For every STEM graduates in this part of the world, 8 STEM graduates are coming out from China. Do you have any idea how many universities are going to survive in a couple of years in the US? And this is not my statistics. It's from a scholar from Harvard University. I forgot the name of they're going to be 40%. He predicted. This is not the statistics, I think, from the last year or this prior to all the war with all the stuff happening. He predicted 40% of the US universities are going to close down and pretty soon. And this is again with all the wars happening, before all the wars happening with all the university funding and all those stuff. You have any idea how many universities are coming out, just put it this way, every week in China? New universities,
Yeah.
high-end universities.
I won't be surprised. It's probably few hundreds.
Every week around one university coming out.
Wow.
It's around every year,
That's like
it's around
50.
40,
Yeah,
50,
52. Yeah.
yeah, 40, 50 new universities. And they're, again, coming out with this. They're spending, when we're cutting down our research funding and sending that money to some of the wealthiest people in this part of the world as a tax write-off and all those stuff. We are spending not even during this country become built all our knowledge foundation, all the research and development. We used to spend around couple of percentage of our GDP on research and development. Have any idea how much money we are spending on the research and development in this country? Government sector, 0.7%. And that is, again, that's not even going to maintain some of the basic. Again, we on that 0.7% number was from maybe the couple of years before number. Now we're cutting down all those research and development sector. And versus China, they're spending at least couple of percentage on their hard, when they're spending on a strategic area. Versus when we are spending on the research and development, we are spending, our companies spending, whether it is for Apple or Google or Facebook, these are the so-called technology company. We are spending our research and development, how they can improve the algorithm, how they can take care of the rage, or how like they can come out with a new dongle. And again, many of these dongles are like the Apple dongles, and if you look at the screens and all those things, many of those research, the fundamental research, happen out of DARPA or government institution, research and development institution, or university. Now, all the universities, first of all, many of them are going to close their shop, pretty soon. Their science and research funding we are cutting down on that one. That without that kind of, we need to have a fundamental long-term research. So unfortunately, again, we need to. My solution is to look back, learn from read our history book, learn how this country these foundations of capitalism was built, rather than the solution is inherently within us. We don't need to look outside. It is the Chinese learned from us, not and they looked at the positive side, and of course, they're taking advantage of our rage now.
Of course. Listeners and viewers, are you listening here? This has great value. This is a hard lesson that America needs to learn. Stop avoiding it. Stop, being addicted to your screens. It's not going to help you. I mean, unless you're doing your research. That's the exception, right? That's the only exception I would say. If you haven't your intent on research, instead of just, I don't know, looking at people shaking their huge butts and 10 hours of cat video is not going to help. I like cat video, but that's a little bit too much, okay? And I like that we could just look to the past. The answer's right there. And we need to focus as a nation instead of just fighting over stupid stuff and political stuff. That's another thing that's driving us back to. Because we fight over stupid stuff that's not even like the most important thing in the world. And we just care about enriching ourselves and our friends, which is very selfish, it's hyper individualistic. And I think that's another thing that's adding to America's disadvantage. Look, I want America to succeed. I really do. And he's providing a solution. So I hope you're at least paying attention to that. You probably ignore everything else. At least you listen to the solution part. Pay attention to that at least. Rewind this if you have to. Go back if you have to. Because there is hope. It's just that we have to go through a rough transition. That's just inevitable. You cannot avoid it. We just cannot. And we are grown-ups. Supposed to learn how to have a tough conversation, okay? Look, I love to joke. I love to do silly things, but this episode, I did a little joking here, but I'm more serious because this is a serious problem. It really, really is, America. I just really hope you're listening. Instead of just being in your feelings and drinking the emotional Kool-Aid, because it's not going to help. It's not gonna help. Alrighty. You add so much.
May I
I
add one
thank
more
you.
quick point on that? Like again,
Oh, sure. Go
I
ahead.
just want to add on that one. Again, the Chinese learned from the century of humiliation. They learned from us, from Theodore Roosevelt and the FDR and the whole, from our history. They took the responsibility of that one. Now they're playing the same card. Unfortunately, we are going to be, if we don't take our own responsibility, we need to start blaming on China or someone else. We need to take responsibility of our own self. Again, we don't need to look anywhere else. We need to look our farmers, the people, the leaders. You need to learn from our own history. If we don't learn, the centuries of humiliation is in front, ahead of us. Whether we want to be a roadkill or we need to build back better, renaissance, then it is going to be morning in America again. Otherwise, unfortunately, we are going to be a roadkill. A century of humiliation is ahead of us.
Take that warning seriously. Turn that to a fuel. Instead of crying and panicking, we got to turn that to fuel. Okay? Turn that to fuel. If you turn pain and even a doom vision as a fuel, that's how you can overcome it. We could turn this around. Like I said, it's not as negative, it's not as doom and gloom as you think. But if we continue to do what we are doing right now, it is going to be. Change is needed, period. I cannot emphasize that enough. Look, he said a lot of wonderful things. I'm just giving you just a short version of it. Change is needed. We need to do it as quick as possible, or else it's too late. We want to be, the flying car, not the roadkill. I'm adding that part. We want to be the ones that's ahead, not just fixing our infrastructure, expanding it further, which in some small cases we slowly are. And I can give you a New York City example. We are starting to do the expansion of the Second Avenue subway. You know how long that delay was? Nearly, nearly seven. No, let me use the more conservative measure. Since World War II, that has been delayed. Okay, that's a really long time, over 80 years. Now we're starting to expand on that. Just preparing the construction. Okay, I mean, we did a very minor expansion on the 7 train. The reason why I'm giving you those local examples, I mean, it is happening, but it's happening extremely and painfully slow. And we still got to fix and of course maintain infrastructure, which we're doing, but we're going slow about it. That's just a very specific example. I'm in New York City. He's in Memphis. He gave his example about the grand data center that they got over there. Okay, for Elon Musk's Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I don't call it X. That's stupid name change. I refuse to call it. I call it Twitter's Grok. Yes, sue me, fight me. You're not going to change my mind. Twitter was a better branding. But we can do this. We just got to hypercharge it. Change as quick as possible. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. Oof, this has been a great one. For those of you who are tough and maintain listening to this podcast, I commend you. You deserve a purple ear or just a purple heart because this was tough. This was tough, even tough for me. But it's not what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear. Okay? You need to hear this. And I don't always play the funny, goofy character. I love to, but this needed a more serious tone. Get it together. Wake up, America. Get out of this stupid fluff ADHD cycle, whatever you want to call it. You need to get out of it. Look, he's just a messenger, but a very profound messenger. We need more of that. All right. So, all right, let's do your plug-in. Where can they find you? What you got a lot of books, like you got a Gods Must Be Crazy Part 2. There's, of course, he alludes to the original one. He got so much books, and of course, a heck of a lot of tech experience. I mean, he got a heck of a lot. So where can they find your website?
I do have a couple of different websites and from different multiple perspective. They can find me through LinkedIn, Saji Madapat, my first name and last name. That's one way. The second way, from the theyyam.us, maybe I'll spell it, THEYYAM.US. So that through that way, that they can contact me. They said, then there's another one, Tiger Rider, tiger-rider.com. It's I do have a passion in the photography and another kind of, passion too. They can find me over there. Of course, they can get this book from, right now it is the Gods Must Be Crazy. I hope you can, yeah. The Gods Must Be Crazy. This book is available in Amazon. Pretty soon it is going to be it's already in addition to Ingram Spark. It is going to be in around 50 different platforms in 200 plus countries. And the first edition of this book was translated into 18 different languages. This book is much larger, around pretty close to 200,000 words. So maybe the one of the biggest book in in Amazon. They have the limit of, I can put only maximum 550 pages, and like 650 MB file size. It's a lot of I'm using a lot of infographics to make it much more friendly to conceptualize. So as a result, is one of the biggest, maybe the biggest book in Amazon. So it will be, hopefully by the end of the year, it will be in many, at least about my dream is about 18 different, at least, even if it is not 18 different languages, at least about a dozen languages by the end of the year. So it will be are available in 50 plus different platforms in 200 plus countries, and including the print. It's already in print, digital, and audiobooks, and it will be in my object dream is also make a especially taking advantage of some of the AI. You may very well familiar with like the Google the podcasting feature, Google LM. Uh, 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 you need to take advantage of some of those things. We need to come out with many documentaries or that kind of stuff. Hopefully soon. That's it. It's going to be pretty soon in so many different platforms and pretty much all around the world. Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. Very inclusive, multiple languages. So if you don't know English or Hindi, you'll be just fine. I'm sure Spanish is going to be included at some point. And God knows, and a lot of other languages. Look, I'm just going to describe just a cover for you for those, if you want a picture, especially for those who are listening. It has an Uncle Sam with a dollar, and it has a very angry red donkey and a very blue elephant. I think that's intentional. That's going to really piss some people off. And you have
Well,
an angry kid that's using looks like a Coca-Cola
cock
bottle
bottle. That's from
as
the Gods Must Be Crazy. That's
yeah,
theme. Yeah.
yeah. He's
That
using
is
it as a
the young
telescope.
generation or the American, civilization looking at the rest of especially the China's emergence, through their Coke bottle prism. An
Yep.
angry boy, yeah.
Oh yeah, he looked very angry
And
for sure.
yeah, the red, and again I switched the colors between the dog donkey, and intentionally, because again, the donkey is angry, it's elephant is charging, like they're looking at left and right, they're going at two different directions. Well, Uncle Sam is still trying to maintain looking forward, than looking at the extremities of left and right. That is and meanwhile, the young boy is anxiously looking at what is happening. And if I may add, another, the things are accelerating, especially with the AI coming into the picture. Especially, I assume many of these listeners are the middle class, at least with some professional background. Fortunately, we are the people going to get really, really hit hard. Even McKinsey's own projection, like pretty soon, majority of us are going to lose our livelihood. And this is going to be, again, if we don't take it back, some of those AI development, it is already a Chinese AI century. Most of the fundamental research and developments application level research and developments are happening in China. Over 50% of the developers are in that AI developers are in that part of the world.
Yeah, so you got your description of the cover, and I'll put the link as well for that book, and I will put the link even for the first book as well because he linked that as well. I'm gonna put a separate link for that. I'll put the link to his own websites and his not just his LinkedIn, even the YouTube channel. You need to get some love there too. I think you mentioned it. I'm gonna still include it in there anyways, so they can see the visual. People are very visual oriented, and I'm sure YouTube will help you out. Okay, be focused Americans. That's what I'm gonna say. So for my podcast, and let me do a shameless plug-in for that. Like, comment, subscribe, share with others. And for those of you that I hope you subscribe, we are growing. Thank goodness. I appreciate you, intelligent folks. And they're not just intelligent, tough folks too. Because we need not just physical fortitude, mental fortitude, spiritual fortitude. We need all of that, okay? And I appreciate you, really, all the subscribers. I really do appreciate you. And not just for the YouTube and for Rumble, my little crazier folks over there. They like to say crazy stuff. So should I start opening up the chats? Good, but don't worry. You're growing as well. We like over 60 there, and we gonna continue to grow it. I gotta say thank goodness for that. All right, for those of you who like to give reviews. Give a review on Apple Podcasts. I don't care about Spotify. If you do it there, I will ignore you. And give an honest review. What made this episode great? What made this episode bad? I want to hear your perspective. Give an honest review. I'd rather have an honest 4.5 rather than a perfect 5.0 because to me that's fake. Those who get 5.0, that's fake. You're doing some dealing over there, kissing butt or paying somebody. I don't know what you're doing, but I think that's fake. Okay? That's all I'm going to say about that. And join Pop Match. I have a unique link for that as well. Join Pop Match. It's a great way to communicate instead of just going through chains of emails. It gets very annoying very quickly. I do have guests. I don't use Pop Match. I encourage you to do that. You know who you are. Use Pop Match at least even temporarily. Okay, just even temporarily, because it's a great way to communicate. You send a nice little one sheet that's changing instead of just giving me a PDF one sheet. If you need to correct, you gotta do all the work and send me another one and go through all the chains of emails. You said about ADHD and all that. And I'm spoiled too. I'm lazy. I'm exposing myself here. Match is clean and organized. Okay, just that's an incentive right there. We keep, it's very the system. It's great, right? So join
And that's how we
Match.
are connected also, to the podcast.
Ex-
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Him and many other guests. The vast majority of guests are in Podmatch. Oh, Sadie Saji's not special there. Most of my people for Podmatch. Podmatch is great. It's a great platform. Matchmaker, you stink. You got so much unprofessional people in there. That's why I left you. There you go. Let me go attack the competition. All right. Now you've made it to the end here. When you complete this audio or visual journey, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.